November 5th, 1960, 1:30 in the morning. A two-lane highway outside a tiny Texas town called Milano. A 1959 Cadillac Fleetwood is rolling toward the railroad overpass. Behind the wheel is the hottest country star in America, a Grammy winner, the man who beat Elvis on the pop charts. His song is playing over the opening credits of a John Wayne movie in theaters at this very moment. He is 35 years old. Coming toward him is a pickup truck. Behind that wheel is a 19-year-old college student. He is drunk. Now, on any other episode of this show, this is where I would say, he does not know yet what is coming. Not tonight. Because Johnny Horton knew. He does not know he has seconds left, but he knows a drunk man will kill him someday. He has been saying it out loud for years. He does not know this bridge is the place, but 1 week ago he gave away his favorite guitar and told his friends goodbye. He does not know his last show is already behind him, but he played it tonight on the same stage where Hank Williams played his last show. And at home waits the same woman who once waited for Hank, widowed by two country legends before her 28th birthday. And the strangest part? Before he died, Johnny Horton set up a secret code phrase with a friend. Proof in case he ever managed to reach back from the other side. Years later, somebody delivered that message, word for word. Welcome to Country Mysteries. I'm Roman, and every week we dig into the strange, dark, and unexplained corners of country music history. Today, the singing fisherman who predicted his own death, Johnny Horton. And his story starts about as far from Nashville as you can get. John LaGale Horton was born on April 30th, 1925, in Los Angeles, California, which is ironic considering he would become the voice of frontier America. His parents were sharecroppers, and the family spent his childhood bouncing between California and East Texas, chasing whatever work existed during the Depression. Home, more or less, became Tyler, Texas. His mother taught him guitar somewhere between harvests. Sharecropping, by the way, is the agricultural version of renting a treadmill. You run all year and somehow still owe money in December. Now, pop quiz. What does a future honky-tonk star do after graduating high school in 1944? Correct answer? He enrolls in a Methodist seminary to become a preacher. That is not a joke. Johnny Horton studied for the ministry. It didn't take. Then junior college in Jacksonville and Kilgore, Texas. Then, again, not a joke, a basketball scholarship to Baylor University. Then Seattle University. Preacher, athlete, drifter, anything but a singer. Honestly, it is my favorite resume in this entire series. By the late 40s, Horton had drifted all the way up to Alaska, where he worked as a commercial fisherman. And there, in the long, cold, silent nights, he started writing songs. Nobody heard them. Nobody cared. Until 1950, when he came back to East Texas and entered a small-town radio talent contest. He won it. And the man hosting that contest was a local disc jockey nobody had heard of yet, by the name of Jim Reeves. Yes, that Jim Reeves. Keep the name. His own story is one of the darkest in this series, and we will get there. For now, remember this. A fisherman with a guitar just won a contest. The countdown starts here. The win sent Horton back to California with actual ambition. Through 1951, he sang on Los Angeles television shows and hosted a radio program in Pasadena, where somebody hung a nickname on him that stuck for life: the Singing Fisherman. Marketing in 1951 was brutally honest. Man sings, man fishes. Done. But the real move came at the end of 1951, when Horton relocated to Shreveport, Louisiana, and joined the Louisiana Hayride, the legendary radio show they called the Cradle of the Stars. The Hayride was the proving ground. Hank Williams launched from there. Elvis would too. In Shreveport, Horton met the two people who would define the rest of his life. First, Tillman Franks, a bass player and manager who would steer his whole career, and who would be sitting next to him in the Cadillac at the end. Second, the biggest star alive, Hank Williams himself. And here is a detail most people get backwards. Hank wasn't doing Horton a favor by knowing him. Hank was a fan. Hank knew Johnny better than I did. Hank was actually a fan of Johnny's and used to listen to every record Johnny would come out with, Billie Jean remembered decades later in the Los Angeles Times. He would stop the car if we were riding along and Johnny came on the radio. Once, after hearing one of Johnny's weaker singles, Hank switched it off and delivered a review. "No, son, this one ain't gonna make it." But then he told Billie Jean that one day Johnny would be one of the biggest stars in the business. Both statements turned out to be true. And yes, Billie Jean, 19 years old, flame red hair, the daughter of a Bossier City police officer. At that moment, Mrs. Hank Williams. Remember her. This story is at least half hers. Meanwhile, Horton's own career was going precisely nowhere. His early records flopped, one after another. His first marriage, to a woman named Donna, fell apart. By the end of 1952, the Singing Fisherman was mostly just fishing. And then, on New Year's Day, 1953, the phone rang all across country music. Hank Williams was dead at 29, gone in the back seat of a baby blue Cadillac. The genre lost its king overnight. We told the full story of that baby blue Cadillac back in episode 3, and if you have seen it, you already know how this genre treats its kings. And according to several retellings of this story, when Johnny Horton heard the news of Hank's death, he was driving through a particular little town in Texas. The town was called Milano. Hold that thought. We are coming back to Milano. September 1953. 9 months after Hank's death, Johnny Horton married his widow. Billie Jean Jones Williams became Billie Jean Horton. Nashville raised a collective eyebrow. Marrying Hank's widow looked to some like career strategy. The couple's own version was simpler. "Horton was a beautiful person," Billie Jean said years later. "We hunted and fished together, and after we married, I quit the road. I just wanted a home and a family." And that is what they built in Shreveport, a house, daughters, and the quietest life a touring musician can have. Horton, the private man, was nothing like the honky-tonk grinder you'd expect. He didn't drink. He fished, obsessively, professionally, religiously. He even co-founded a fishing lure company, the Cane River Bait Company, with his best friend and favorite fishing partner. That friend's name was Johnny Cash. The man in black himself was a silent partner in a worm and lure business. The two Johnnies, knee-deep in a Louisiana river, arguing about bait. Somewhere out there is an alternate universe where they both quit music and just sold fishing tackle. Frankly, that universe is calmer. The career, meanwhile, crawled. It took until 1956 for Horton to land a real hit. Honky Tonk Man, a song so durable that Dwight Yoakam took it back up the charts 30 years later. He backed it up the same year with the top 10, I'm a One-Woman Man. After 5 years of flops, the Singing Fisherman suddenly had a career. Then, in early 1959, came his first country #1. When it's springtime in Alaska, it's 40 below. A murder ballad, by the way, in which the hero gets knifed for dancing with the wrong woman. Foreshadowing was apparently free that year. And then Tillman Franks brought him a song written by an Arkansas school principal named Jimmy Driftwood, who had set the War of 1812 to an old fiddle tune just to make his students learn history. It was called the Battle of New Orleans. Nobody expected what happened next. June 1st, 1959. The Battle of New Orleans hits #1. Not on the country chart, although yes, there too. #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The pop chart. The Elvis chart. A country history lesson about General Jackson and the bloody British sat on top of American pop music for 6 straight weeks. It won the Grammy for Best Country and Western Performance, and Song of the Year went to its writer. Billboard would later rank it the #1 country song of the entire first 50 years of the Hot 100. The record eventually entered the Grammy Hall of Fame. This wasn't a hit. This was a monument. And Horton, with Franks, did the smartest thing possible. He leaned all the way in. The Saga song became his brand. In 1960, he fired off Sink the Bismarck, top 10. Then North to Alaska, the title song for a John Wayne picture, playing in every movie theater in America. Another #1. Think about where Johnny Horton stands in the fall of 1960. 3 enormous hits in 18 months. A Grammy. Hollywood on the phone. He was openly angling for an acting role on the TV series Wagon Train. Money. A family. He had gone from a Methodist seminary and an Alaska fishing boat to beating Elvis at his own game. That is, statistically speaking, the single worst moment for fate to collect. Which, of course, is exactly the kind of thing our genre insists on. This should be where the story ends happily. But you clicked on this video, so you already know it doesn't. Because behind the gold records and the fishing trips, the biggest star in country music was spending his nights doing something else entirely. He was talking to the dead. This is the part that separates Johnny Horton from every other tragedy in country music. And I want to be careful here, because most of what we know comes from the people who loved him. So take every detail with the appropriate grain of salt. Johnny Horton was very much in touch with the spirit world. He believed that he could communicate with the dead. That is not a tabloid talking. That is Steve Kilgore, the son of Johnny's closest friend and songwriting partner, Merle Kilgore, writing about a family friend. Séances, mediums, literal, scheduled conversations with the other side. Merle Kilgore was right there with him. The two of them put their trust in a medium named Bernard Ricks. Merle's son, Steve Kilgore, tells a family story about Ricks. One afternoon, the medium telephoned Merle's wife and told her to go check on their little daughter, Kim. The mother said Kim was fine, napping in her bedroom. Ricks insisted, "Check again." She went in and found the little girl with her head trapped under the mattress, turning blue, suffocating. The ambulance arrived just in time. That is the story the Kilgore family tells to this day. Believe it or don't, but understand, that was the world Johnny Horton lived in. In his world, the other side answered the phone. And in that world, Horton carried one fixed, immovable conviction. He was going to die young, violently. And this is the specific part, at the hands of a drunk. Not in an accident, not on the road, at the hands of a drunk. He said it for years, to multiple people. It shaped his behavior in ways his bandmates found strange. He couldn't stand drunks. He refused to tolerate musicians who drank on the job. By many accounts, he avoided drunk fans after shows. The handshakes, the bear hugs, the breath. Hiding out in dressing rooms between sets like a man avoiding a contagion. A honky-tonk singer who is terrified of drunks is like a lifeguard who is terrified of water. The entire business model is drunks. Friends laughed it off, a superstition, a quirk. Then, in the last week of October 1960, the quirk stopped being funny. About a week before his death, Johnny Horton drove to Merle Kilgore's house carrying his stage guitar, a beautiful custom instrument inlaid with mother-of-pearl. He handed it to Merle as a gift. Kilgore refused. "I can't accept this. It's the guitar that you play on all of your shows." And Johnny answered, this is quoted by Merle's own son. "Merle, last night I had a vision that I am going to die, and I am saying goodbye to all of my friends." Now, what do you do when your best friend says that? Merle Kilgore did something extraordinary. He didn't argue. Instead, he proposed a test, borrowed straight from Harry Houdini, who had made the same pact with his wife. They agreed on a secret code phrase known to the two of them and no one else on Earth. If a message ever came back from the other side carrying that exact phrase, Merle would know it was really Johnny. They set the code. Remember that it exists. It comes back at the end of this story, and when it does, it will put a chill down your spine. November 4th, 1960. The gig? The Skyline Club, Austin, Texas. The same roadhouse where Hank Williams had played his final show in December of 1952, days before dying on the road. Horton knew it. By several accounts, he was uneasy about this particular booking, and there are claims he wanted out of it. And, as the legend goes, versions of this detail differ. When he left the house, he kissed Billie Jean goodbye on the same cheek in the same spot where Hank had kissed her before his own final trip. Maybe it happened exactly that way. Maybe 60 years of retelling improved it. I'll let you decide. What is documented is this. The show went on, the club was packed, and Horton, true to form, reportedly spent the breaks shut away in the dressing room, away from the drunks he feared. After the last set, there was no hotel. Duck season opened in the morning, and Johnny had a hunting date with his friend, singer Claude King, so he loaded the Cadillac for the 5.5-hour night drive home to Shreveport. Manager Tillman Franks rode up front. Guitarist Tommy Tomlinson stretched out in the back. 1:30 in the morning, November 5th. The railroad overpass at Milano, Texas. A pickup truck coming the other way crosses the line. Behind its wheel, a 19-year-old Texas A&M student named James Davis. Drunk. Head on. Tillman Franks was critically injured against the dash. Tommy Tomlinson's leg was shattered. It would eventually be amputated. The drunk driver walked away with scrapes and a broken ankle. In his autobiography, I Was There When It Happened, Tillman Franks made a point of recording that the young man suffered only minor injuries. Some later retellings killed the driver off in the crash for segregation. He survived just fine. Johnny Horton died on the way to the hospital. He was 35 years old. Killed, precisely as he had predicted, in the one specific way he had spent his whole adult life dreading, at the hands of a drunk. On the road home from the same club that hosted Hank's last show, leaving behind the same widow. And, by those earlier retellings, in the same little town where he had once heard the news that Hank Williams was dead. At some point, the word coincidence files for overtime pay. And one more absurd footnote to the same date. That very day, Ward Bond, the star of Wagon Train, the exact show Horton wanted to act on, dropped dead of a heart attack in Dallas that same afternoon, right after a football game. November 5th, 1960, took them both. The funeral was held in Shreveport on November 8th. Johnny Cash was shattered. I locked myself in one of the hotel's barrooms and cried, he admitted later. At the service, Cash stood up and read from the Gospel of John, chapter 20, the resurrection. Decades later, on a personal recording, he would introduce a song with one quiet line. Johnny Horton was a good old friend of mine. And Billie Jean? 27 years old, widowed by two of the biggest names country music has ever produced, both of them straight after playing the same stage. The press called her cursed. What she actually became was formidable. She had a top 40 hit of her own in 1961, Ocean of Tears, and then spent the following decades as a one-woman legal army. She sued MGM over the Hank Williams biopic that erased her from history. fought for her rights as Hank's legal widow, and, in more than 30 years of courtroom wars, by her own account, never lost a major case. Merle Kilgore put it best. She can tell you more about interrogatories and lawsuits than anyone I know. I'm glad we're on the same side. 2 funerals taught her the industry's rules better than any record label ever could. But the strangest chapter was still unwritten. Because years after the crash, Merle Kilgore was visiting his friend Bob Lockwood, a radio announcer covering a baseball game in Cincinnati. The game was rained out. And through a chance encounter there, as Steve Kilgore tells it, a woman passed along a message on the air side of that rained-out day. Not for Bob, for Merle. The message was one sentence. The drummer is a rummer and he can't hold the beat. Word for word. The secret code. The phrase Johnny Horton and Merle Kilgore had invented together in private before Johnny died. Built around the one thing Johnny hated most. A musician who drinks on the job. Kilgore was, by every account, floored. He told the story for the rest of his life. Now, the cold shower, because on this channel we always serve one. This account comes from the Kilgore family. There is no recording, no transcript, no independent witness list. Secrets leak. Memories bend toward the beautiful. That is the skeptic's case, and it is a solid one. The believer's case is one sentence long. It was the exact phrase years later from a stranger's mouth. So, 3 doors and you pick one. Door number 1, coincidence. In 1960, America's highways were a slaughterhouse. Drunk driving was barely policed, and touring musicians drove all night as a job requirement. Given enough country singers on enough dark roads, somebody's superstition eventually matches reality. The skyline, the widow, the town of Milano. Tragic dice, nothing more. Door number 2, self-fulfilling legend. Horton really did fear drunks and really did talk about dying young. But the tidy details, the same cheek, the same town, the message from beyond, grew in the telling, the way every good country story grows. Door number 3. Johnny Horton saw it coming. All of it. And even managed to call home afterward. Here is what sits on the record. The premonition talk existed before the crash, not after. The guitar changed hands a week early. The code was real enough that Merle Kilgore staked his reputation on it until the day he died. And a drunk 19-year-old really did end the life of the one country star who had spent his entire adult life predicting exactly that. The verdict is yours. Prophecy, coincidence, or legend? Drop it in the comments. I read every one of them, and last episode you delivered verdicts sharper than the courts ever did. Next week on Country Mysteries, the taxman knocks on Willie Nelson's door and hands him a bill for $16.7 million. They seize his ranch, his studio, his gold records, everything except the one guitar he refuses to die without. How does the most beloved man in country music get robbed blind by his own people and then beat the federal government with an album? Subscribe so you don't miss it. This has been Country Mysteries. I'm Roman. Keep the volume up and the headlights on.